The rain hammered against the corrugated metal roof of Murphy's auto repair like bullets from heaven. Relentless, unforgiving, angry. Marcus wiped his oil-stained hands on a rag that had seen better decades, his weathered face illuminated only by the flickering fluorescent light above his workbench. 45 years old. And what did he have to show for it? A failing garage that barely kept the lights on, a bottle of whiskey that knew his secrets better than any human being, and a photograph of Sarah, his beautiful 8-year-old daughter, tucked behind the cash register, smiling that gap-toothed grin that once made his whole world make sense. Tholostifonti, 2 years. 2 years since the accident, 2 years since that drunk driver stole everything that mattered from him. Marcus threw the wrench across the garage, watching it clatter against a stack of old tires. The sound echoed in the empty space like a scream. He used to be different. God, how different he used to be. Sarah would run into this very garage after school, her backpack bouncing, her voice filling every corner with laughter and questions. "Daddy, why do cars need oil, Daddy? Can you fix anything, Daddy? Will you teach me to drive when I'm 16? 16. She would never be 16. He grabbed the whiskey bottle from beneath the register. Unscrewing the cap with trembling fingers, the amber liquid burned going down, but not as much as the memories burned in his chest. Outside, the storm raged like his own personal hurricane of grief. Tick, tick, tick. The wall clock mocked him. 11:47 p.m. Another day survived, another day closer to... What, nothing, absolutely nothing. That's when he heard it. Splash, 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 footsteps in the puddles outside, fast, desperate footsteps. Marcus looked up from his bottle, squinting through the rain-streaked window. Through the distorted glass, he saw something that made him question his sobriety. A figure in white, running. Not walking, not jogging, running. Like death itself was chasing behind. Marcus stumbled to the door, his hand hesitating on the handle. Part of him wanted to ignore it, to retreat back to his whiskey and his misery. But something deep inside, some buried instinct that Sarah's death hadn't quite killed, made him turn the lock. The door swung open, and his breath caught in his throat. There, standing in his doorway like some kind of supernatural apparition, was a young woman in a wedding dress. But this wasn't the pristine white gown of fairy tales. No, this dress was torn, muddy, and soaked through. Her dark hair clung to her face in wet strands, and her eyes, Jesus, her eyes, were wild with terror. "Please," she gasped, her voice barely audible over the thunder. "Please, I need help." Marcus stared at her, his whiskey-clouded mind struggling to process what he was seeing. She couldn't be real. She had to be some kind of alcohol-induced hallucination. But then she stumbled forward, and he caught her, solid, warm, real, in his arms. "What the hell?" he muttered, helping her inside. "Lady, what are you doing out there, in that dress, in this storm?" She looked up at him, and in that moment, Marcus saw something that nearly brought him to his knees. Her eyes. They had the same desperate courage he used to see in Sarah's eyes when she was scared but trying to be brave. "They're after me," she whispered, glancing back at the door. "I ran. I couldn't marry him." Marcus felt something shift inside his chest, a feeling he thought had died with his daughter. Protection. The instinct to shield someone smaller, someone vulnerable from the monsters of the world. "Who's after you?" he asked, gently guiding her to a chair near his workbench. "My father, his men. They'll find me." Her voice cracked, and she wrapped her arms around herself. "I was supposed to marry Victor Castellanos tonight. Do you know who that is?" Marcus's blood ran cold. Everyone in the city knew that name, Victor Castellanos, real estate mogul, city council puppet master, and rumored to have connections to some very dangerous people, the kind of man who got what he wanted, when he wanted it. "Jesus Christ," Marcus breathed. "You ran from him?" She nodded, tears mixing with the rainwater on her cheeks. "My father. He owes Victor money. A lot of money. Gambling debts. The marriage was supposed to clear the debt." She laughed bitterly. "I was the payment." Marcus felt anger bubbling up from somewhere deep, anger he hadn't felt since the night Sarah died. How could a father sell his daughter like property? How could anyone look at this terrified young woman and see nothing but a transaction? "What's your name?" he asked, his voice gentler now. "Isabella," she whispered. "Isabella Rodriguez." "Isabella," he repeated it, tasting the name. "I'm Marcus." "And you're safe here, okay? For tonight at least, you're safe." She looked around the garage, at the tools hanging on pegboards, at the half-disassembled engine on the workbench, at the photograph of Sarah behind the register. I don't want to cause you trouble if they find me here. Let me worry about that, Marcus said, surprising himself with the conviction in his voice. For the first time in 2 years, he had something to focus on besides his own pain. Someone needed him. Someone was counting on him, just like Sarah used to. He grabbed a clean shop towel and handed it to her. You must be freezing. I've got some coffee. It's not great, but it's hot. Isabella accepted the towel gratefully, dabbing at her face. Why are you helping me? You don't even know me. Marcus paused, looking at her sitting there in that ruined wedding dress, so small and brave and frightened. Because, he started, then stopped. How could he explain? How could he tell her that helping her felt like the first meaningful thing he'd done since losing everything that mattered? Because it's the right thing to do, he said finally. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but inside the garage, something had changed. Marcus felt it in his bones, a shift, an awakening, a purpose he thought he'd lost forever. He didn't know it yet, but this was the moment everything would begin to change. This was the moment two broken souls would start to find their way back to the light. Together, dawn crept through the garage windows like a hesitant thief, painting everything in shades of amber and rust. Marcus had spent the night in his office chair, watching over Isabella as she slept fitfully on the old couch he kept for late-night repairs. Every small sound made her twitch. Every car passing outside made her eyes flutter open in panic. She was running even in her dreams. Marcus studied her face in the morning light. She couldn't be more than 28, maybe 30. Young enough to be Don't think about it. Don't think about how old Sarah would have been in 20 years. Don't think about the daughter he'd never walk down the aisle. Isabella stirred, her eyes opening slowly. For a moment she looked confused, taking in the oil-stained walls, the smell of motor oil and metal, the sound of Marcus tinkering quietly with a carburetor. Then reality crashed back and he saw the fear return to her face. It wasn't a dream, she whispered. No, Marcus said gently, setting down his wrench. But you're still safe. It's morning now. No one came looking. She sat up slowly, wincing as her muscles protested. The wedding dress, what was left of it, was now completely ruined. Dried mud, oil stains and wrinkles had transformed it from a symbol of someone's perfect day into evidence of a desperate escape. I must look terrible, she said, trying to smooth her tangled hair. Marcus felt something unexpected twist in his chest. Even disheveled, even terrified she was. Beautiful. The thought came unbidden and unwelcome. He pushed it away quickly. She was vulnerable, scared, running for her life. The last thing she needed was, "You look like someone who fought for her freedom," he said instead. "There's nothing shameful in that." Isabella's eyes met his, and for a moment, something passed between them. Understanding, maybe, recognition of shared pain. "I've never fought for anything before," she admitted. "My whole life I've just done what I was told. Good daughter, good student, good bargaining chip." The bitterness in her voice was sharp enough to cut glass. Marcus poured coffee into 2 mismatched mugs, handing her one. "What changed? Why run now?" Isabella wrapped her hands around the warm ceramic, as if the heat could chase away more than just the morning chill. "Victor, the man I was supposed to marry, he made it clear what kind of marriage it would be." She shuddered. "He showed me the papers, prenup that gave me nothing, no access to money, no right to leave the house without permission, no choice about children." Children. The word hit Marcus like a physical blow. He thought about Sarah, about how excited she'd been about the idea of being a big sister someday. "I would have controlled everything." "Everything," Isabella confirmed. "And when I tried to object, he grabbed my wrist so hard he left bruises, said I needed to learn my place before the wedding." She rolled up her sleeve, showing fading purple marks. "That's when I knew I had to run or I'd disappear completely." Marcus felt that anger again. Hot. Protective. Righteous. "What about your mother? Couldn't she help?" Isabella's laugh was hollow. "My mother died when I was 15. It's just been me and my father since then, and he's not the man he used to be. The gambling addiction took everything good in him and replaced it with desperation." Desperation. Marcus understood that feeling intimately, but he'd never been desperate enough to sacrifice another person, especially not someone he was supposed to protect and love. "So what's the plan?" he asked. "You can't stay here forever. Eventually, they'll start looking in places like this." Isabella set down her coffee, her hands shaking slightly. "I don't know. I don't have money. I don't have anywhere to go. I've never lived alone, never had a job." Her voice cracked. "I don't even know how to be free." Marcus studied her face. The uncertainty, the fear, but also something else. Determination. The same look Sarah used to get when she was facing something scary but refused to give up. "We'll figure it out," he said, and was surprised by his own certainty. Isabella looked up at him with something like hope in her eyes. "I mean," Marcus hesitated. What did he mean? He'd spent 2 years pushing everyone away, drowning in his own grief. Why was he suddenly ready to get involved in this woman's problems? Because she needed him, because for the first time since Sarah died, someone needed him. "I mean, you don't have to figure it out alone," he said finally. The gratitude in her smile was almost too much to bear. "Why?" she asked. "Why are you willing to help a stranger?" Marcus looked at the photograph of Sarah behind the register, then back at Isabella. "Because I used to be the kind of man who helped people. I'd like to try being that man again." The morning passed quietly. Marcus worked on repairs while Isabella rested, but he found himself glancing at her frequently. She'd found an old magazine and was reading it with intense focus, as if memorizing every word, when she laughed at something. A genuine, surprised laugh. The sound filled the garage like music. When was the last time he'd heard laughter in this place? Around noon, a black sedan pulled up outside. Marcus felt his blood freeze as 2 men in expensive suits got out, looking around with the casual menace of professional enforcers. "Isabella," he said quietly, and she looked up to see them through the window. The color drained from her face. "They found me," she whispered. "The back room," Marcus said urgently. "Now lock the door and don't come out no matter what you hear." "Marcus, I can't let you go." His voice had the authority of a man who'd once been responsible for keeping a child safe. Isabella obeyed, disappearing into the back room just as the men approached the front door. Marcus wiped his hands on his coveralls and walked to meet them, his heart pounding but his face calm. He'd protect her. Whatever it took, he'd protect her, just like he should have protected Sarah. The taller of the 2 men smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Good morning. We're looking for someone, young woman, about 5'6", dark hair. She might have come through here last night." "A lot of people come through here," Marcus said evenly. "Have you got a picture?" The man pulled out a phone, showing Marcus a professional headshot of Isabella, in a simple black dress, smiling politely at the camera. Even in the formal photo, Marcus could see the sadness in her eyes, the look of someone who'd already given up on her own dreams. "Haven't seen her," Marcus lied smoothly. "What's she wanted for?" "Nothing criminal," the second man said, though his hand rested meaningfully on something under his jacket. "Just a family matter that needs resolving." "Family," Marcus repeated. "Right." The first man studied Marcus carefully. "You sure you haven't seen her? Because Mr. Castellanos is very eager to resolve this family matter, and he's generous with people who help him, and brutal with people who don't." Marcus heard the unspoken threat. "Like I said, haven't seen her, but I'll keep an eye out." The men exchanged glances. "Do that," one said. "And remember, this is a small city. People talk, people see things. Mr. Castellanos has a lot of friends and they all want to help him find his missing bride." They left as quietly as they'd come, but Marcus knew they'd be back. He waited until their car disappeared around the corner before calling Isabella out of hiding. She emerged pale and shaking. "They'll keep looking." "Yeah," Marcus agreed. "They will. I should go. I should run again. I can't put you in danger." Marcus looked at her, this brave, terrified young woman who'd already been betrayed by everyone who was supposed to love her, and felt something settle in his chest like a key turning in a lock. "You're not going anywhere," he said firmly. "We're going to figure this out together." Together. The word felt strange on his tongue after 2 years of absolute solitude, but it also felt right. For the first time since Sarah died, Marcus had someone to fight for again. 3 days passed in a strange rhythm of normalcy and tension. Isabella helped Marcus in the garage during the day, handing him tools, learning the names of parts, asking questions with the same eager curiosity Sarah used to show. At night, she slept on the couch while Marcus kept watch, dozed fitfully in his chair, always listening for the sound of expensive cars pulling up outside. It felt almost like having family again. The thought terrified him more than Castellanos' men ever could. "Hand me that socket wrench," Marcus said, his head buried under the hood of a 1998 Honda Civic. Isabella rummaged through the toolbox with growing confidence. She'd learned quickly, had good hands, paid attention, remembered everything he taught her. This one, perfect. Their fingers brushed as she handed him the tool, and Marcus felt that same unexpected jolt he'd been fighting for 3 days. "Stop it," he told himself. "She's vulnerable, she's scared, and she's young enough to be." But every time he looked at her, He saw less of the terrified bride who'd stumbled through his door and more of the strong, intelligent woman underneath. "Marcus," Isabella's voice was hesitant. "Can I ask you something?" "Shoot." "The little girl in the photograph, Sarah, she was your daughter?" Marcus's hand stilled on the wrench. He'd been waiting for this question, dreading it but also somehow needing to share it. "Yeah, she was. What happened to her?" The words came easier than he'd expected, maybe because Isabella's voice held no pity, only gentle interest. "Drunk driver 2 years ago, she was walking home from school, and he ran a red light." Marcus pulled his head out from under the hood, wiping his hands automatically. "She died instantly. They said she didn't feel any pain." Isabella was quiet for a long moment. "Do you believe that?" The question surprised him with its directness. "I want to, but honestly, I think it's just something they tell parents so we can sleep at night." "You loved her very much." "She was everything," Marcus said simply. "My whole world after her mother left when Sarah was 3. It was just me and her. I used to think I was raising her. But really, she was raising me, teaching me how to be better than I thought I could be." Isabella moved closer, her presence warm and comforting. "She sounds wonderful." She was. "Smart as hell, funny, brave." Marcus smiled, remembering. "She wanted to be a mechanic like me, but also a princess, and also an astronaut. I told her she could be all 3 if she wanted. What would she think of you helping me?" The question hit him like a punch to the chest. What would Sarah think? For 2 years, he'd been drowning in grief and whiskey, letting his life fall apart, abandoning everything she'd loved about him. "She'd probably ask why it took me so long," he said quietly. They worked in comfortable silence after that, but Marcus felt something shifting between them. The careful distance he'd been maintaining seemed to shrink with every shared glance, every accidental touch, every moment of easy conversation. This was dangerous territory. That evening, as Isabella heated up canned soup on the hot plate in his office, Marcus found himself really looking at her. She'd borrowed one of his old work shirts and a pair of jeans he'd found in the lost and found box. The clothes were too big, but somehow she made them look elegant. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her face, free of makeup, relaxed for the first time since he'd met her, was simply beautiful. "You're staring," Isabella said, without looking up from the soup. Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks. "Sorry, I was just thinking." "About what?" She turned to face him, and he saw something new in her eyes. Awareness, interest, the same electricity he'd been fighting. "About how different you look now compared to that first night." Isabella smiled, and it transformed her entire face. "I feel different, ill. For the first time in my life, I'm making my own choices, even if they're small ones. What to eat, what to wear, how to spend my time. It's..." She paused, searching for words. "It's like I'm finally becoming real." Marcus stood up, drawn to her like gravity. "Isabella, I know what you're thinking," she said softly. "I'm too young, I'm in trouble, this is complicated." "All of those things are true, I know." She stepped closer. "But I also know that you've made me feel safer than I've ever felt in my life. And when you look at me, you see me. Not a bargaining chip, not a prize to be won, just me." Marcus's resolve crumbled as she reached up and touched his face gently. "Isabella, you've been through trauma, you're grateful. But that doesn't mean..." "Stop," she said firmly. "Stop deciding what I feel for me. I've had enough of men telling me what I think and want and need." Her hand was still on his cheek, and he leaned into the touch despite himself. "I know the difference between gratitude and... this... The word hung between them, heavy with possibility and danger. "I'm 17 years older than you," Marcus said desperately. "So, you could have anyone. Someone young, someone without baggage, someone who doesn't see me the way you do." Isabella moved even closer, and Marcus could smell her hair, could see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes. "Someone who doesn't make me feel brave and safe and alive." Marcus felt his carefully constructed walls crumbling. "Isabella, I'm not your daughter, Marcus. I'm not Sarah. I'm a grown woman who's choosing you." The words broke something open in his chest. All the feelings he'd been fighting, the attraction, the protectiveness, the growing love, crashed over him like a tide. "I'm broken," he whispered. "I drink too much. I have nightmares. I've spent 2 years pushing everyone away." "Then let me in," Isabella said simply. "Let me help put you back together," when she kissed him. It was gentle at first, tentative, questioning. Marcus stood frozen for a heartbeat, his mind screaming warnings and protests. But then Isabella deepened the kiss, and he was lost. He pulled her closer, pouring 2 years of loneliness and pain and desperate need into the connection between them. She felt so right in his arms. So perfect, like a missing piece of himself he'd never known was gone. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Marcus rested his forehead against hers. "This is crazy," he murmured. "Good," Isabella smiled. "I've been sensible my whole life. It's time to try crazy." That night, for the first time since Sarah died, Marcus didn't drink himself to sleep. Instead, he held Isabella on the narrow couch, listening to her breathe, feeling her heart beat against his chest. She fit perfectly in his arms, like she'd been made for this exact spot, like she'd been made for him. As dawn approached, Marcus allowed himself to imagine a future he'd thought was impossible. A life beyond grief, beyond loneliness, beyond the suffocating weight of loss. A life with this incredible woman who'd chosen him despite all his flaws and damage. But first, they had to survive Victor Castellanos. They had to find a way to build a life that wouldn't constantly be looking over its shoulder. They had to be free, and Marcus was finally ready to fight for that freedom, not just for Isabella, but for both of them, together. The sound of metal grinding against metal filled the garage as Marcus worked on the transmission of an old pickup truck. 2 weeks had passed since Isabella first stumbled through his door, and the rhythm of their days had settled into something that felt almost domestic, almost normal. Isabella sat on a crate nearby, helping him sort bolts and washers, her movements efficient and sure. She'd learned fast, had natural mechanical instincts that impressed him. But more than that, she'd brought something back to life in this place that had been dead for 2 years. Laughter, conversation, purpose. "So then what happened?" Isabella asked, continuing a story about Sarah that Marcus found himself sharing more easily these days. "Well, she decided that the car needed to be pink. Not just any pink, fun, princess pink, she called it. So she snuck into my paint supplies and," Marcus chuckled, remembering, "I came out to find her painting racing stripes on Mrs. Henderson's station wagon." Isabella laughed. That wonderful musical sound that had become the soundtrack to his days. "Please tell me you have pictures." Somewhere Sarah documented everything, said she was going to write a book about my daddy the car doctor when she grew up. The easy smile faded from Isabella's face. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to make you sad." "You didn't." Marcus looked up from the transmission, surprised to realize it was true. "A month ago, I couldn't even say her name without falling apart now. Talking about her with you feels good. Like she's still part of my life, instead of just part of my pain." Isabella's eyes softened. "She is still part of your life. Love doesn't die, Marcus. It just changes shape." God, how did she get to be so wise at 28? Marcus set down his wrench and moved to where Isabella sat, drawn to her as always. She looked up at him with those expressive brown eyes, and he felt that familiar flutter in his chest, equal parts desire and tenderness, and something deeper that scared him with its intensity. Love? He was falling in love with her, had probably already fallen. The realization should have terrified him, but instead it felt like coming home. "Isabella," he said softly, reaching out to touch her face. "I need to tell you something." "What?" But her smile suggested she already knew before Marcus could answer. The sound of car doors slamming outside made them both freeze. Isabella's face went pale as she recognized the expensive purr of the black sedans that had been haunting her nightmares. "How many?" Marcus asked, moving quickly to the window. 4 cars, maybe 12 men. Isabella's voice was steady, but he could see the fear in her eyes. "They're not just looking anymore, Marcus, they're here for me." Marcus felt something cold and determined settle in his chest. "Back room now." "No," Isabella stood up, surprising him with her firmness. "I'm done hiding, I'm done running." "Isabella, these aren't reasonable people. They won't listen to—" "Then we make them listen." She moved to his workbench and picked up a heavy wrench. "I choose you, Marcus. I choose this life, and I'm going to fight for it." The front door exploded inward. Before Marcus could respond, Victor Castellanos strode in like he owned the place. Flanked by 6 men in dark suits, he was younger than Marcus had expected, maybe 40, with the kind of predatory handsomeness that probably charmed investors and intimidated rivals. "Isabella, darling." Victor's voice was silk over steel. "You've caused quite a stir." Isabella stepped forward, and Marcus felt his heart swell with pride at her courage. "I'm not going with you, Victor." "Of course you are." Victor's smile never wavered, but his eyes were ice. "We have a contract, your father's debt." "My father's debt isn't mine to pay," Isabella interrupted. "I'm not property to be bought and sold." Victor's gaze shifted to Marcus, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Dad, you must be the grease monkey who's been harboring my fiancée. Do you have any idea what kind of man you're dealing with? Marcus stepped protectively in front of Isabella, his own voice calm but implacable. The kind who thinks he can buy people, the kind who leaves bruises on women, the kind who's about to learn that some things aren't for sale. Everything is for sale. Victor laughed. Including you, name your price, 100,200. There isn't enough money in the world. Victor's facade finally cracked, revealing the cold brutality underneath. Then you're stupider than you look. He nodded to his men. Take her. Kill him. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. The men moved forward. Isabella raised her wrench, and Marcus felt something primal and protective explode in his chest. The same fierce love that had once made him check Sarah's closet for monsters every night. No one would hurt the people he loved. Not again. Marcus grabbed a tire iron from his workbench and swung it in a wide arc. Catching the first man across the ribs, the garage erupted into chaos. Shouting, fighting, the crash of tools and equipment being overturned. But Marcus wasn't fighting alone. Isabella moved with him, watching his back, using her smaller size and mechanical knowledge to her advantage, when one of Victor's men cornered her near the hydraulic lift. She hit the emergency release, sending a car crashing down inches from his feet. "The police are coming!" she shouted over the noise, though Marcus knew she was bluffing. Neighbors called it in. The lie worked. Victor's men were professionals, not street thugs. They couldn't afford to be caught in a public brawl. Victor himself looked furious but not surprised. This wasn't over, his expression said. This was just postponed. "You're making a mistake," Victor called out as his men retreated. "Both of you. I always get what's mine." "She's not yours," Marcus said, his arm around Isabella's shoulders. "She never was." "We'll see." Victor straightened his tie. Back to his polished, predatory self. "Enjoy your little romance while you can. I have all the time in the world." They left as suddenly as they'd come, but the threat hung in the air like smoke. Marcus and Isabella stood in the wreckage of the garage, breathing hard, holding each other. "We can't stay here," Isabella said quietly. "I know. Where can we go?" Marcus looked around at the only home he'd known for 15 years, at the picture of Sarah behind the register, at the life he'd built and lost and found again. "I don't know, but we'll figure it out. Together, together." He pulled her closer, feeling her heart beat against his chest. "Isabella, what I was trying to say before they came. I love you." She looked up at him, tears and determination shining in her eyes. "I love you too, and I'm going to fight for that love, Marcus. For the first time in my life, I have something worth fighting for." As they held each other in the ruins of his garage, Marcus felt something he'd thought was gone forever. Hope. Not just hope for survival, but hope for a future, hope for happiness, hope for love that could overcome any obstacle. Even Victor Castellanos. They had tonight to plan, to prepare, to hold each other close. Tomorrow, they would disappear, not as a broken mechanic and a runaway bride, but as two people in love, ready to build a new life together, ready to be free. The pre-dawn darkness wrapped around Marcus's pickup truck like a protective blanket as they drove through the empty streets. Isabella sat close beside him, her hand resting on his thigh, both of them hyper-aware that they were leaving everything familiar behind. Everything except each other. "Second thoughts?" Marcus asked, glancing at her profile in the dashboard light. They'd been driving for 3 hours, putting distance between themselves and Victor Castellanos, heading toward Marcus's brother's ranch in Montana, a place so remote that even Victor's money and connections might not reach. "None," Isabella said firmly. "You." Marcus thought about the garage they'd abandoned, the life he'd known for 15 years, the grave he'd visited every week for 2 years. "Just one." Isabella tensed. "What?" "I wish I'd been brave enough to do this sooner, to choose happiness over grief." The relief in her smile was radiant. "We're choosing it now, that's what matters." The truck ate up miles of interstate, carrying them toward an uncertain but hopeful future. As the sun began to rise, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Isabella curled up against Marcus's shoulder and dozed fitfully. "She trusts me completely," Marcus realized. "This incredible woman has put her entire future in my hands." The responsibility should have terrified him. Instead, it filled him with a strength he'd forgotten he possessed. They stopped for breakfast at a truck stop outside Denver, choosing a booth in the back where Marcus could watch the parking lot. Isabella looked different in civilian clothes, jeans and a sweater he'd bought her, younger and more relaxed than he'd ever seen her. "Tell me about your brother," Isabella said, picking at her pancakes. "Jake's complicated. We haven't spoken in 2 years." Not since Sarah's funeral he thought I was wallowing in self-pity. I thought he didn't understand grief. We were both probably right. What if he won't help us? Marcus considered this. Jake had always been the responsible one, the one who followed rules and paid taxes and believed that problems could be solved through proper channels. He'll help whatever our difference is. He's still my brother. But as they pulled up to the ranch that afternoon, a sprawling spread of weathered buildings surrounded by endless Montana sky, Marcus felt less certain. Jake emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on his jeans, and the expression on his face was unreadable. Marcus, Jake's voice was carefully neutral. Been a while. Jake? Marcus climbed out of the truck, suddenly aware of how different his world had become since the last time they'd spoken. This is Isabella. Jake's eyes flicked to Isabella, taking in her youth, her beauty, the obvious intimacy between them. Mum, his tone was polite but reserved. I know how this looks, Marcus said quickly, but it's not what you think. She's not some midlife crisis. She's everything. Something in Marcus's voice, the quiet certainty, the depth of feeling, made Jake look at him more closely. You look different, brother, better than you have in years. She saved my life, Marcus said simply. Isabella stepped forward, her hand finding Marcus's. Mr. Murphy, I know this is sudden and I know you have questions, but your brother is a good man, and I love him. We're in trouble, and we need help. Jake studied them both for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Well, come inside, let's hear the whole story, over dinner in Jake's warm kitchen. They told him everything. Victor Castellanos, the forced marriage, the men with guns, the decision to run. Jake listened without interruption, his weathered face growing more serious with each detail. Jesus, Marcus, he said finally, you really know how to pick them, don't you? But there was no judgment in his voice. Only concern. This Castellanos guy, he's not going to just let this go. I know, Marcus said. That's why we need to disappear for a while, start over somewhere he can't find us. Jake leaned back in his chair, studying them both. You're talking about running for the rest of your lives, is that what you want? Isabella spoke up, her voice steady. If it means being together, yes, I'd rather live one day as myself with Marcus than a lifetime as Victor's prisoner. And you? Jake asked Marcus. You're willing to give up everything, your garage, your life, Sarah's memory. The mention of Sarah hit Marcus like a physical blow, but Isabella's hand squeezed his, giving him strength. Sarah's memory comes with me wherever I go, and as for the rest, he looked at Isabella, saw the love and trust in her eyes. I lost everything that mattered 2 years ago. Isabella gave it back to me. She is everything that matters now. Jake was quiet for a long moment, then stood up. Well then, I guess we need to make some plans. The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparation. Jake had contacts, former military buddies who specialized in helping people disappear legally. New identities were arranged, bank accounts set up, a small house purchased under a shell company in a town called Cedar Falls, Oregon, population 3,000, where strangers were noticed but not questioned if they minded their own business. It's not much, Jake said, showing them photos on his laptop, but it's got a small garage attached. You could start over, build something new. Marcus stared at the pictures. A modest 2-bedroom house with a white picket fence, surrounded by pine trees and mountain views. It looked like the kind of place Sarah would have loved, where she could have grown up safe and happy, where he and Isabella could build a life together. It's perfect, Isabella breathed, leaning against his shoulder on their last night at the ranch. Marcus found himself standing outside looking up at the endless Montana stars. Sarah had loved stargazing, used to make him lie on the hood of his truck and tell her stories about the constellations. She would have liked Isabella, Jake said, joining him in the darkness. You think so? I know so. She would have seen what I see, that Isabella makes you the man you used to be, the man Sarah knew and loved. Marcus felt tears prick his eyes. I miss her so much, Jake, every day. I know, but Marcus, grief isn't supposed to be a life sentence. Sarah wouldn't want you to stop living because she couldn't. They drove out the next morning. Jake's blessing and a thick envelope of cash from his emergency fund, seeing them on their way as they crossed the Oregon border, Isabella reached over and took Marcus's hand. No regrets, she asked. Marcus thought about his old life, the loneliness, the drinking, the slow suicide of grief. Then he looked at the woman beside him, this incredible person who'd chosen him despite all his damage and doubt. None, he said firmly. This is our chance, Isabella, our chance to build something beautiful together. What if Victor finds us? Then we'll face him together. But I don't think he will, men like Victor. They move on when something becomes too much trouble. He'll find another bride, another deal, another way to get what he wants. And what do we want? Isabella asked softly. Marcus smiled, raising her hand to his lips. A life, a real one. Maybe a little garage where I can teach you everything I know about engines. Maybe Sunday mornings in bed reading the paper. Maybe, he hesitated, then pushed forward. Maybe someday, if you want, a family. Isabella's breath caught. You'd want that, children. With you, I'd want everything. As Cedar Falls appeared around a bend in the mountain road, a postcard-perfect small town nestled in a valley of evergreens, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in 2 years. Peace. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of hope. Not the end of grief, but the beginning of joy. Not the forgetting of Sarah, but the honoring of her memory by choosing to live fully again, together. 6 months later, the bell above Murphy and Isabella's garage chimed softly as Mrs. Chen brought in her ancient Honda Civic, the same worried expression she wore every month when the car started making its funny noise again. It's doing that thing again, Marcus, she said apologetically. I know I should probably just buy a new car, but this one has character, Isabella finished, emerging from under the hood of a pickup truck, her coveralls smudged with oil, her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. And we'll keep her running as long as you want us to. Marcus watched his wife, interact with their customer, and felt that same flutter of amazement he experienced every morning when he woke up beside her. They'd been married for 3 months now. A simple ceremony at the Cedar Falls courthouse with Jake as their witness, but every day still felt like a gift he didn't deserve. Isabella Murphy. She'd taken his name with the same fierce determination she brought to everything else, claiming it like a badge of honor. The transmission fluid needs changing, Marcus said, checking Mrs. Chen's car. And there's a small leak in the brake line. Nothing dangerous yet, but we should fix it. How much? Mrs. Chen asked with the resigned tone of someone on a fixed income. Marcus and Isabella exchanged a look. One of the hundreds of wordless conversations they had every day. $40 for parts, Isabella said. Labor's on the house. You brought us cookies last week, remember? Mrs. Chen's face lit up. You two are angels, absolute angels. After she left, promising to return with more homemade cookies, Marcus pulled Isabella into his arms, not caring that they were both covered in grease and motor oil. We're going to go broke if you keep giving away free labor, he murmured against her hair. We're doing fine, Isabella protested, but she melted into his embrace. Besides, it's good karma. Help people, and the universe helps you back. The universe had certainly helped them. Cedar Falls had welcomed them with the easy acceptance of a small town that valued good work over complicated pasts. The garage was thriving. Their little house felt like home, and every night Marcus fell asleep grateful for the miracle of loving someone who loved him back completely. Speaking of the universe helping us, Isabella said, pulling back to look at him with sparkling eyes. I have news. Something in her tone made Marcus's heart skip. Good news or bad news? That depends on your perspective. Isabella's smile was radiant, nervous, glowing. I'm pregnant. The wrench in Marcus's hand clattered to the floor. Pregnant. A baby, their baby, the possibility they'd talked about in whispers and dreams, was suddenly miraculously real. Are you sure? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. 3 tests, all positive. I saw Dr. Martinez this morning while you were at the parts store. Isabella's hands fluttered to her still flat stomach. Marcus, we're going to have a baby. The tears came without warning. 2 years of grief and joy and overwhelming gratitude crashing over him like a tide. He pulled Isabella close, holding her as if she might disappear, as if this perfect moment might shatter like glass. I love you, he whispered into her hair. I love you so much it scares me sometimes. I love you too. Isabella pulled back to look at his face, her own eyes bright with tears. Are you happy? I know this is fast, I know we're still building our life here, but happy? Marcus laughed, the sound echoing through the garage. Isabella, I thought I'd lost my chance at this, at family, at being a father again. I thought that part of my life was over forever. And now, Marcus placed his hand over hers on her stomach, imagining the tiny life growing there, part him, part her, part miracle. Now I feel like the luckiest man alive. That evening, they sat on their front porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. Isabella curled against Marcus's side, his hand resting protectively on her stomach. I was thinking, Isabella said softly, if it's a girl, maybe Sarah as a middle name. Marcus felt his breath catch. You'd do that. She's part of you, which makes her part of us. I want our child to know about the sister who came before, who taught their daddy how to love completely. How had he gotten so lucky? How had a broken-down mechanic drowning in grief attracted a woman this generous? This perfectly matched to his damaged heart. And if it's a boy, he asked. I was thinking about that too. Isabella smiled up at him. What about Samuel Marcus Murphy, Sam for short? Sam. Marcus tested the name, liked the sound of it. Sam Murphy, future mechanic and astronaut and maybe prince, too, just like his big sister would have been. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear, the same constellations Marcus had shown Sarah all those years ago. But now, instead of sharp-edged grief, the memories brought gentle warmth. Sarah would always be part of him, but she was no longer the only light in his darkness. He had Isabella now. Soon they'd have their baby. Do you ever think about him? Isabella asked suddenly. Victor. Wonder what happened to him. Marcus considered this. They'd never heard from Castellanos again. No mysterious phone calls, no threatening letters, no black sedans in their rearview mirror. Jake had eventually reported that Victor had married someone else, a senator's daughter, who came with political connections and a massive dowry. Sometimes, Marcus admitted, mostly, I feel sorry for whoever he ended up with, and grateful that it wasn't you. I used to have nightmares about him finding us, but not anymore. Isabella snuggled closer. Hard to be afraid of monsters when you're this happy. A year ago, Marcus would have said that kind of happiness was impossible, that people like him, broken people, grieving people, people who'd lost everything, didn't get second chances at joy. He'd been wrong. Sometimes love really was enough. Sometimes two damaged souls could heal each other. Sometimes a runaway bride and a broken-hearted mechanic could build something beautiful from the wreckage of their separate pains. Isabella. Thank you. For what? Marcus looked at his wife, her face peaceful in the starlight, her hand resting on their unborn child, her entire presence a daily reminder that miracles do happen, and felt his heart overflow with gratitude. For running, for choosing me, for saving my life in every way a person can be saved. Isabella turned in his arms, her eyes bright with love and promise. We saved each other, Marcus Murphy, and we're just getting started. As if in response to her words, a shooting star blazed across the Montana sky. Brief, brilliant, perfect. Marcus made a wish, the same wish he'd been making every night for 6 months. Let this last. Let us have forever. Somewhere in the darkness, he could almost hear Sarah's laughter, bright and joyous and approving. His daughter was at peace,